Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Let's take a look at this week's astrological report. This is for November 25 through December 1 of 2025. So this week we have a lot of Venus aspects happening, including Venus entering the Grand Trine with Saturn, Neptune, and Jupiter. And there's actually quite a bit here. Venus will be in conjunct to Chiron. That's one little difficult aspect we'll have to adjust to. I'll talk about that. But Venus trine Jupiter and Venus trine Saturn exact on Wednesday, November 26th. It'll carry over for the first part of this week, though. And Venus will also then be opposing Uranus. That'll be on November 29. And Venus will then trine Neptune and then change signs, ingressing Sagittarius by November 30th. So a lot of changes for Venus, relationships and money. But because Venus is connecting to these planets in an easier way, it suggests that there's potential financial opportunities for people. Money, resources could be coming in. There could be some financial support for some people, especially I think people that have degrees for the water and the earth signs around roughly 25 degrees. You'll be in this alignment of this Grand Trine. So I'll talk about the meaning, but Venus will be connecting to Saturn, which is also very serious in relationship. And it could very well be about relationship as well. There could be some sort of a positive dynamic for some relationships on multiple levels. It may not just be romantic, it could be family, since Venus is connecting to Cancer as well. So it's going to be different for everybody, and some people might not see any big developments, but for other people, I think there is something here. And I'll talk about the people who are most affected by this as I go through this report. But overall, some positive Venus connections happening this week. And looks like we also have Mercury and Saturn stationing direct. Those are going to be two main events of the week that are very powerful. And it's pretty much all week long, but technically Saturn is stationed direct on November 27, Thanksgiving coming up here on Thursday in the United States. But Saturn's influence will be very amplified and extra powerful for the rest of this week and into next week, and I'll talk about the overall meaning of that. At the same time, this Thursday, the moon will be square the sun for the first quarter moon phase. So we enter the crisis and action phase by Thursday. That could have some issues with traveling since it is connected to Sagittarius, where the sun is, where Mars is. And Sagittarius season, it's more of an indulgent time of the year. It's a lot about traveling. And so there could be a few complications. I'll look at the chart when we go through November 28 to see what it all looks like. It's also going to be a fateful day. November 27 is the first quarter moon, and then November 28, Black Friday, will be very fateful with a few challenges, it looks like, and some tension to work with. So Saturn will be very strong, peaking by Thursday, but strong all week long, changing directions, finalizing this long transit in Pisces the last couple years. And then by November 29, Mercury stations direct. So Mercury backs up to about 20 degrees. And then everything about Mercury is going to be extra amplified around this weekend. So our thoughts, our plans are going to be ready to start moving forward, but back through territory that we've already been dealing with certain things. Plans, thoughts, ideas, communications, figuring something out or going through a process. We're not fully past it until mid-December, but it's going to be, I think, a big development, that we can start moving forward and seeing things, beginning to see things in a new light, new perspective of what we've been dealing with, and on the world stage, a lot about, again, scandals and conspiracies and digging up truth that's been hidden and buried. A lot of stuff's, going to be coming out more and more for the rest of this week into December, and reaching that full moon in Gemini is going to really peak so much information on different levels. So a lot more understanding is still continuing to be developed. There could still be some relationship and financial surprises, even some unpredictability that starts to come in by this weekend. But I still think that there's a lot of possibilities for good developments and good surprises with relationships and money overall. But those are all the biggest developments. Basically, a lot about Venus, Mercury, and Saturn is the main kind of stars of the show this week. The moon is going to be waxing all through Aquarius, all through Pisces, and Aries for the week ahead. So the moon will make a conjunction to Pluto, the north node of Destiny, Saturn, Neptune, and Chiron. All right, so let's get started here. I'm going to go through the chart. It's all written out for you in the description with these aspects and times, as always. So let's get started here for Tuesday on November 25. We start things off with the change of mood and circumstances right off the bat. Really early in the morning, the moon ingresses Aquarius for the next 2.5 days. And right off the bat, the moon is next to Pluto. So when we start things off, the moon, right before the moon changes signs from Capricorn, it'll be trine down to Uranus and making a sextile to Neptune with that minor grand trine. So it kind of activates these outer planet connections that are in play for the world, bringing it more down to earth, bringing it more into our everyday circumstances right off the bat for Tuesday, world developments and future developments for certain people. But the moon coming into Aquarius changes the mood to be a lot more social from this point forward. The moon in Aquarius is still being ruled by Saturn, plus Saturn slowing down to station direct is over amplified. So there's still a lot of things here behind the scenes that people are picking up on. Politics, world developments, government stuff is still very amplified this week from behind the scenes. There's actually going to be a turning point for some government developments too. But the moon will still have somewhat of a connection to certain pressures, responsibilities, burdens, things that people are dealing with on more of a serious level behind the scenes in their lives. We'll still be connected to that, but now there's going to be this need to start to detach a little bit more, start to look at things from an intellectual perspective. And it's still going to be much more about the group and the community and friends and social life for the next 2.5 days. But with the moon reaching Pluto, it's going to be quite intense. First thing in the morning here, that aspect will be exact by 6:44 Mountain Time. So really early in the morning on the West Coast, first thing in the morning, pretty much for everybody, is a sense of change and transformation that's in the air. Maybe some power struggles, a little bit of shadow, a little bit of the undercurrents that people could be picking up on. And there could be a little bit of an intensified mood and circumstances playing out for some people. But again, we're going to be working with it in a different way by intellectualizing feelings and emotions and kind of, again, being more objective about things. But it could also be a sense of transformation first thing in the morning for the rest of the day. This is also when Venus is making that exact in conjunction to Chiron. So relationships are just about to enter some sort of a more supportive dynamic, generally speaking, but we also have to adjust to these sensitivities that have been in place for people with Chiron and Aries. You know, it's been activated in so many different ways throughout the year. I've been talking about it a lot, but it has a lot to do with the self, how we feel about the self, our confidence, and, you know, it could be internal, it could be external things about the self, but relationships are having to adjust to a little bit of a sensitivity as well. Or, again, adjusting between this need for freedom and independence for what we want to do, but yet the Scorpio side says there's deeper connections or other people involved, intimacy. So kind of an adjustment between the self and deeper connections with others is possible. That could still be a little bit sensitive on Tuesday. So be careful with your intimate interactions with people. Just know that there could be a little more of a sensitivity that some people could be feeling about love or relationship or money. Something like that is possible. plus this intense mood and circumstances with friends or community that could be happening here from this point forward. And then, as I say every month with the moon going through Aquarius, people's emotional reactions are typically different from what you might expect. People are more of a little bit of a rebel, more of this independent vibe about themselves, even though group and friends and community is still a strong emotional need. There's also a need for freedom away from the group and the community. But it still comes to a lot of pressure and serious matters that people are dealing with from behind the scenes being rolled by Saturn. And then there's just one more aspect for the day on Tuesday, and that's where the moon is sextile the sun, and the sun is now in Sagittarius. So again, this is the season of abundance and things that are over the top and indulgent and travel. A lot of travel, especially for the United States, of course, with it being holiday week. And it really comes back to family, again, because all this Sagittarius is being rolled by Jupiter in Cancer, the home and the family, which is rare. That Sagittarius doesn't get that every Thanksgiving. That's every 12 years. But the moon sextile the sun is a good little part of this phase. We're building up. The moon is gaining more and more light. You might see the crescent moon up in the sky. And it's building into this cycle that was rooted in Scorpio. But this is fire and air, so it's much more social, much more outward and passionate and adventurous and just connecting to other people. I think is going to be a big focus this week for a lot, of course, with family too, but travel and just a lot more busyness and activity going on. But typically with the moon sextile the sun, there is a good alignment between how people are feeling internally and what they're focused on externally, or again, the mood and the feelings versus what's literally happening and where the focus is. They're both on the same page. Generally speaking. And then that's the last aspect. So it's a good part of the cycle, more cooperation, more flowing energy. Mars is coming off of the T-square to the nodes of fate. I talked about that in last week's report. So Mars kind of showing that the world is at a crossroads with fate and destiny right now. Things that are playing out could have a long-term effect. People are at a crossroads, perhaps about some decisions that they have to make for the future. And I also think it's connected to military in certain places around the world. I even think that there's already been military activity, maybe covertly happening that we don't see just yet. It might come out later. But whatever military is doing, I'm making this video on Monday. So this was, I think, exact on Sunday. But I would say this last week into this week, there's still fateful connections for the world based on military activity going on, even if we don't see it all necessarily right off the bat. And then our own personal action too, could be at a fateful crossroads, especially for people that have personal planets around 14 to 15 degrees. Well, let's say 13, 14, 15 degrees roughly of Pisces, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Gemini, the mutable signs that require some sort of adjustment, being flexible and adaptable to changing situations and things like that. And then Mars here in Sagittarius usually amplifies people's opinions and beliefs and philosophies. And, it's good for debate. It's much better for inspiring adventure and freedom, education and learning and traveling and all these Sagittarius type of things. So now we get to Wednesday. On November 26th, and we see this grand trine really strong coming in with Venus. Mercury's also a part of it. Mercury's been going back and forth in it. But now Venus comes into it, the last planet that's been going through this grand trine. So Venus has been lagging the value, the money, the resources, the relationship developments. And now it's entering something new that feels like it is much more supported for Wednesday. November 26th, we start off with the moon in conjunct to the south node. So the moon is halfway through Aquarius on Wednesday, still continuing this vibe of wanting to be more intellectual, detached, dealing with friends, group, and community is more of an emotional need for people. Politics is very strong still. Well, that's going to be continuing no matter what, but it's science, technology, things, these Aquarius vibes are very strong. But the moon in conjunct to the South Node, we might be having to adjust to something from the past, something about work or service or health with friends and community, or just having to make some sort of adjustment to the everyday practical life that requires some sort of a change or adjustment that some people might have to make on Wednesday. Of whatever you're doing, there might be something that comes up that, again, requires you to make a change of some kind or deal with something that's ongoing or something like that. It's not that big of a deal. And the biggest aspects is this Venus grand trine, Venus trine Jupiter, and Venus trine Saturn, all here on Wednesday perfectly. So again, now Venus is considered debilitated. It's not like it's at its very best, but it's getting more help than it usually does from Jupiter, which is exalted, and from Saturn, which is extra powerful because it's beginning to station direct. And Saturn is authorities and reality. Jupiter here in Cancer can be home and family, but there's something coming in for some people that I think is going to be most relevant if you have 23, 24, 25 degrees of the water signs, especially if it's a personal planet like your sun, moon, Venus, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. So if you do have a personal planet that's already been going through this grand trine for a while, this could somehow be another leg of support for you of whatever's been showing. But it's personal, it's private. These are private areas of the chart, and it is more about water, of feelings and needs and what's below the surface. But Scorpio also deals with other people's money, other people's resources, and there could be some sort of support for some people about that. I think it will be good overall too for general money and resources that have more potential, more opportunity for something of value or an increase or support from some source that could be coming in for some people here this week. I wish I could say it would be for everybody, but of course it's not going to be every single person. But it still shows in the world here, the two best planets in astrology, Venus and Jupiter, are in a good supportive alignment with each other, which usually increases wealth and value for things. And we could be thinking about it, whatever that is that comes up about money and resources for some people this week. Mercury's a part of it that's already been going through this, of how we're thinking about things, been processing something for the future. And this could be a part of that process that's significant for a lot of people. And the trine to Saturn shows maturity within relationships too. Something more serious in relationship that's coming into alignment that feels supportive for some people's relationships. Could be intimate, could be family, could be on any level. The moon is in Aquarius at the time, so it could also deal with friends and group and community. This could show some sort of a funding for groups of people that need money or support in some way. There could be a lot of charity this week with the holiday and people just being more supportive to others than usual or something like that. That's possible. If you want to buy something, if there is a big ticket item you want to purchase, I think it's not perfect, but I think it's a good alignment to do that. I think that there could be great value in something that you are doing here on a value or financial level. If you're initiating something, buying something like that on Wednesday, it'd be a good day for it if you want to buy something. Could get a deal, things like that. Could have good long-term connections with whatever it is that comes up. So again, relationship and money is in a really good way generally for people on Wednesday. And the moon is also sextile Mars, as the day goes on Wednesday. First thing in the morning, actually. So Wednesday could be a strong day for traveling for people. Good day for general activity, feeling inspired, taking the initiative and making things happen, being more passionate and active with less obstacles. Mercury still is retrograde. We have to consider that. And there has been a lot of issues with traveling and transportation for a while. So I can't guarantee things are perfect when it comes to traveling and transportation just yet. And I do think there's going to be a certain issue that comes up when that moon squares the sun and Mars. But we'll look at those days when that happens. And this day on Wednesday feels just much more supportive from the beginning of the day. Now the moon does run into a square with Mercury as the day goes on later on. So let's see when this will be. That's going to be in the evening hours and nighttime for some people on Wednesday night. So that's a few hours of a potential issue with traveling and transportation, with the group and the community, with information. There could be an obstacle or a delay or something that happens for some people on Wednesday night. It's not the best time on Wednesday night to be dealing with some serious communication or information or mercurial things. There could be a lot more tension in that process, including communications with friends and your community in some way. For some people they're just kind of a tension between the heart and the mind and how we're thinking about things and communicating about things versus how people are showing their feelings and their emotions. Again, it's a clash between Scorpio and Aquarius. I've talked about this many times, of attachment versus detachment. The Mercury-Venus wants intimate communication and going into these deeper levels, and the moon in Aquarius is kind of clashing with that. No, I want my freedom. I don't want to get too overwhelmed with emotions. The Aquarius moon is a great moon sign for people with community and being involved in community and having a lot of good supportive connections to community. They can have a good impact on community and friends and all that. But the Aquarius moon generally doesn't want to sit on the couch and have somebody cry on their shoulder with all their problems. They're not that kind of a supportive person. And so, that's a little bit of where that tension can come in if people are going a little bit too deep in an intimate communication or relationship scenario on Wednesday night. A little bit of a clash on the mood or the feelings and the comfort level with those dynamics between you and others, especially if it's somebody that's more like a friend or someone that's not like romantic, then it's a little more tension involved. And that will continue as the moon will build up that square to Venus as well. But that will be the following day. And then the last aspect for Wednesday night is the moon sextile Chiron. So whatever is happening on Wednesday night, it can have a healing effect for people too, including friends and community, or even the self and what's happening, just how people feel about themselves too. So the moon is kind of at odds with this chart because, again, we have a water grand trine all about emotions and feelings and sensitivities and nurturing and deeper things below the surface. And the moon here is in a position that's more up in the head and intellectualizing things. But that will change because the moon will come into Pisces and just amplify the water even more. But that's what we have for Wednesday, the moon in Aquarius. And then we get to Thursday, Thanksgiving here, November 27. First thing in the morning, the overnight hours, the moon is still in Aquarius, at the end of Aquarius. But the first aspect will be the moon in conjunct to Jupiter and the moon squaring Venus and squaring Uranus. So there's something coming in here early morning Thursday, so kind of more like Wednesday night carried over into the early morning hours of Thursday. That's actually creating a lot of tension. And part of that tension is, okay, we're going to start to have to adjust to the family dynamics, generally speaking, of course, for Americans, especially here. Or the mood, the feelings, the circumstances, which again is more friendly and detached and intellectual, kind of not as sensitive, not as emotional, not as nurturing and, caring as in the same way that Cancer is. So having to adjust between those two different vibes really early, though. There's going to be a mood change later on for Thursday that will be different. So this is just in the first part. It'll also probably show that people are beginning to adjust the mood for the next few days compared to where it's been, for the first part of the week. But then the moon is square Venus too. But again, it's super early, so I think it's late enough in the morning where like the East Coast and Europe will be really, awake and affected by it, and even some people on the West Coast. It's only for a few hours, so it's not going to last very long. But again, it comes right back to that clash that was the following, the previous day, on Wednesday when the moon was square Mercury. It's kind of carrying over into the early morning of Thursday about, again, Aquarius versus Scorpio and those two different dynamics that are challenged between the head and the deeper connections. But moon square Venus can feel a little bit kind of uncomfortable in the relationship, social dynamic for a little bit. There could be some tension in the social dynamic first thing on Thursday morning. It won't last, so if you do feel something with the community or the group or the family, the vibes will change as the day goes on. But it is clashing a little bit. Preferences are clashing. The mood is clashing a little bit with relationships. And it could also speak about any kind of big financial things that took place this week or something. But again, this is just it's not that big of a deal. We get this every month. So moon, Venus, hurt feelings are not, it's not totally easy to feel 100% satisfied or content with what's going on for super early in the morning. And then at the same time, with the moon squaring Uranus, as the moon is reaching the last degrees of Aquarius, this is late morning for the West Coast, afternoon for the East Coast, nighttime for Europe. The moon at this critical last degree squaring Uranus could show things aren't normal. Things are different. Things are unpredictable. There could be some disruptions. There could be some excitement. It's not that big of a deal. It's just the moon going through here as it usually does. But it's the first square since Uranus has been back in Taurus. So again, a little bit of a social kind of dynamic that's a little bit unpredictable or exciting or changeable or something happening that's just not normal on Thursday afternoon. But then that changes the overall mood because we see that the moon then ingresses Pisces. And this is really where Saturn then becomes perfectly stationary, direct. So Saturn's influences really powerful on Thursday afternoon and beyond. Right as the moon comes into Pisces, it's going to be connected to that even more. And like I said, because the moon is in Pisces now, it just amplifies and increases the overall water energy in the world, which has already been flooding for so long, both literally and metaphorically. It's like water, 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 feelings, emotions, sensitivities, and now the general circumstances of the day on the second half of Thursday, for other people to be Thursday evening, Thursday night, that this mood begins to happen, this mood change. But people do get much more sensitive. Some people, like in certain family dynamics, will be hitting the bottle probably a little more of this need, for something. But it's also like, again, super energetically sensitive and picking up on the environment very strongly. And this is kind of the beginning, too, of the first quarter moon, a little bit of a challenge from this point. starts to come in for some people on Thanksgiving. So there could be a challenge, that kind of starts for Thursday in different places. I don't think every single person will be affected by it, but this is the background for the world on Thursday. Changing mood and circumstances from the air, which now we don't have any air except for Pluto. So we've lost the air that the moon was kind of going through. It's not so much intellectual anymore. It's not so much actually communicative in the same way. Now there's a lot more of this unspoken reading between the lines and these connections that we have on this more emotional, deeper level from behind the scenes. And behind the scenes becomes a bigger influence for people for the next 2.5 days. But again, Saturn is amplified. Saturn is turning direct. So people that are most affected by this Saturn stationary will be people that have a planet about 24 to 25 degrees of the mutable signs, especially Pisces. And you have a rare Saturn conjunction going on. If you have roughly 25 degrees of Gemini, then you've been under this square from Saturn for the last year, and this is the grand finale of this square, this pressure that you're feeling. If you have the sun, it's a test of your character of Gemini. It's testing, information and everything that Gemini rules. But if you have personal planets at 25, you've been under it. You've been under a feeling of heaviness or restrictiveness, limitation in some way. Other people, it's a need to really work on something that's quite serious too. It all depends on each person. But again, if you have 25 Gemini, you're feeling that Saturn very strongly, and it's not just a one-day thing here. It's going to be extra amplified in this way for the next couple weeks before it starts to slowly build up momentum forward again. And it's the beginning of this last part of Saturn in Pisces until we get to February, when Saturn comes back to Aries and we're done with this Pisces transit. But it's a turning point too, and it amplifies everything about responsibilities, commitments, duties, and obligations, and where we're restructuring life, where we have burden and serious matters that we've been dealing with. Generally, it shows from behind the scenes, and even energetic pressures, psychological pressures, and then on the global level that I've talked about so many times, this restructuring to the world's belief systems and philosophies and ideologies and the way the world is going to be ran and functioning. It's this overall, a lot of things that are happening privately behind the scenes. And then it's also on the global level connected to conspiracies and scandals that are turning the corner, that are starting to come out more and more, of what's been hidden for years behind the scenes. But it can still increase, especially for the people that have really been affected by this Saturn-Neptune. Again, it can be depression for some people. It could be a feeling of feeling defeated, wanting to give up, wanting to retreat, wanting to escape. Anything that some people have already been dealing with for a while, it's going to be extra strong this week and next week, since Saturn is amplified more than normal by the stationary. But again, 25 Gemini will be really feeling it. 25 degrees, roughly, give or take, of Virgo. It gets the opposition that you've been dealing with. You're going to feel that station very powerfully. And then Sagittarius, 25 degrees of Sagittarius, give or take. You're feeling that sense of maybe not feeling as free as you would like to be in this phase, or again, all these Saturn things that are heavy behind the scenes that are affecting the mutable signs. So those are the people that will probably be most affected by it. Other people that have, 25 Capricorn, 25 Taurus, 25 Cancer, 25 Scorpio, you're more in alignment with this Saturn that's helping you structure, restructure, deal with serious matters that are a little more easier for you, I think. You could still have other transits that are difficult, but this transit would be more in alignment with you in an easier way. And again, it's about, now it's about starting to look ahead, starting to look forward at our commitments and responsibilities and duties and where we stand with those things and what we need to complete and finalize, for the next few months. All that kind of stuff is going to be really strong on Thursday, on Thanksgiving. So, the second part of the day, actually most of the day on Thursday has a lot of hard aspects. There's really no easy aspects at all on Thanksgiving. So that just means that, if I'm just being real with you, it shows that this Thanksgiving might not be the best out of them all. It doesn't have to be terrible, but it doesn't mean everybody's experience will be bad, but it just shows that there could be some issues on Thanksgiving for a lot of people. It may not be the easiest Thanksgiving out of all. There could be some challenges, and then that's because that Saturn is so strong, and then that moon making those aspects, of disruptions and changes and unpredictability is possible. And then the last aspect on Thursday night is the moon square the sun, which is a challenge. And that is late, though. For a lot of people, that's going to be the following day on Friday morning. But for people on the West Coast, it's still Thursday night, really late, when that first square comes in. And that's, again, a square, a first quarter square based on the new moon. Now we've reached a part of this cycle that's a challenge, the crisis in action, how to move something forward. And it's just really, it can be less cooperative. It can feel like there's some issues from Thanksgiving in some way that has come up for people. It could be about traveling for some people. If some people are trying to leave late on Thursday night and travel through the overnight hours, probably don't recommend that because of this square. There could be some issues with that. There's an issue between how people are feeling and what they're focused on. Again, the Sagittarius side is more outgoing, more funny, more of this more indulgent, bigger vibe. It could be a lot about sports and just good times, and the moon is clashing with that. The moon in Pisces is more sensitive and behind the scenes and maybe wanting to withdraw into your own world, but yet there's still a focus on, social or family dynamics or whatever you're dealing with on Thursday night. But it's ultimately about the challenge on how to move something forward if you feel stuck or you feel restricted. Maybe the pressure of Saturn stationing is very powerful for some people, and they're feeling that weight, that burden, that depression, that lack of hope or something. And maybe that's a part of the challenge with the moon squaring Sagittarius, the hope, the feelings of feeling optimistic about something. Maybe there's an issue with that, something that's come up through Thursday that brings up a challenge for some people. But it's the first quarter. It's not about being defeated. It's not about giving up. It's about finding creative solutions to any problems that do come up. You might want to step away for a couple hours, if there is something blocking you or restricted or limited here, or a problem that comes up late on Thursday into Friday morning. Step back if you can for a few hours. Be patient, and it'll probably pass. But at the same time, from this point forward, the moon will be building the square to Mars. And that does show there is going to kind of be this building tension and friction in the world into the end of the week. So first quarter moon, the moon is half full up in the sky, and it's a little bit of a challenge that we have to get past late on Thursday into Friday morning. And then we do get to Friday on November 28th. Friday morning, we get past that first quarter square early morning hours. And then things kind of open up. Now for the next couple days, we have a lot more trines and sextiles and flowing energy. So it almost feels like two of the most challenging days could be Thursday and Friday. Thursday and Friday have the most tension out of this week, it looks like. There's moments throughout the week in different ways, but Thursday and Friday is the two biggest challenging days. And so that challenge continues into Friday. Of course, that's Black Friday. That's when people go crazy typically as well. That could be part of the problem, a lot of that tension. But the moon right off the bat is the moon is conjunct the north node of destiny. So it's a very fateful day on Friday for the future of what's developing from behind the scenes. And it kind of triggers that T-square from Mars that's been in place too. So Friday, there's friction, there's tension, there's agitation, aggressiveness, conflict. There could even be accidents and injuries. You just got to be extra careful, extra patient, because really there's just two aspects. The moon is with the north node of destiny, and then the moon is square Mars. So it's a fateful square in a sense. So people are extra aggressive on Friday, this Friday, which makes total sense, but it might be extra than normal or something. Moon square Mars, that's going to come in Friday night perfectly. So be extra careful Friday night. If you're traveling on Friday, especially Friday night, be prepared, take your time. Try not to rush here and be extra cautious and have backup plans and, things like that. People's emotions and feelings could be extra riled up, extra tense. There could be a lot of energy about sports, like I said, that's extra amplified with developments in sports or something. But Moon square Mars, we get it every month in certain ways, but this one is fateful. So it's also impulsive. And people are extra sensitive too. You have to be careful because people could be offended more easily here or something like that. Plus the moon is approaching Saturn from this point. So it's right next to this amplified Saturn of pressure from behind the scenes and all that I talked about. And it might even kind of initiate the beginning of this build up to the square from Mars to Saturn too. And then there's going to be a new moon in Sagittarius square Saturn and Neptune. So I think that as the moon goes through here, it kind of really activates the buildup of what's next of this friction and this tension. And again, it could also be on the global level, military stuff here that's building up, I believe, it's already in play, and then it'll probably continue to be in play through the rest of November and December. Something about military and aggressiveness and conflict. And Mercury, you can see that S is beginning to station direct. That'll be the following day when it's perfect. So really the last aspect is Friday night. I would kind of lay low. It might be a busy time in the world socially, or a lot of activity out and about maybe on Friday night, I would imagine. But it's not looking too good, generally speaking. There's going to be plenty of people that have a perfect night and no issues, but this is just the general background that shows certain places will definitely have more conflict. So if you have 17 degrees, 17, 18, give or take, of Pisces, Sagittarius, then you're really in this square. And then 16, 17, 18, give or take, of Gemini and Virgo, you're also in this square, because you're also having a Mars transit if you have planets in the mutable signs around 16, 17, 18 degrees as Mars is building past this point. So you just have to be more careful. You have to slow down, pay more attention to what you're doing, try to avoid accidents and injuries and conflict in general. Also, like I've said before, I typically don't nurture through food and stuff when the moon is in a square with a difficult planet like Mars or Saturn, and the moon is wrapped in between this vibe of Mars and Saturn. So be extra careful on Friday night too of food poisoning or nurturing oneself in unhealthy ways and things like that. Especially if you are like when it's perfect, and you can check the description to get the perfect time that this aspect is in play. It's going to be late. It's on the West Coast in the mountain time. It's around 8:30 or so here. So it'll be super late on the East Coast, early morning hours of Saturday in Europe. But if you want to get that exact time, try to avoid eating food when you see an aspect like that. It doesn't mean that it has to be terrible or you're going to have some bad experience, but I just, based on my experiences through the years, I just avoid that because there's just a better chance, the odds are better that you could run into some sort of an issue with food that could get you sick or something. And then I guess for some people it could be drinking or getting, sick in some way. So that's what we have. And again, I do think Thursday and Friday have the most challenges. So that's unfortunate considering it's a holiday. And then we move into Saturday on November 29. And the moon is right next to Saturn, stationary. But there is a lot of easier aspects because, again, the moon is now entering that grand water trine again. So there's a lot of flowing energy, but it's still very emotional, sensitive, a lot of behind-the-scenes vibes here. A lot of people want to retreat into their own world and escape and, be in what they want to be in perhaps. But at the same time, Saturday morning, with the moon conjunct Saturn, it's kind of this weight, this pressure, this heaviness from behind the scenes that we're picking up on. And again, it comes back to what people have been dealing with on a more personal level in their lives that this Saturn transit is talking about. So remember what I said, if you had like 25 Gemini, 25 Virgo, 25 Sagittarius, and Saturn is squaring or opposing, well then the moon going through there squares your planet or opposes your personal planet and kind of reactivates that tension. But that Saturn aspect that you have right now, if you do have 25 mutable, it's long lasting. It's not just going to go away, but it's being re-amplified, I think, on Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon for people. It's just that the moon is trine Mercury, so there's more of this better flow between the heart and the mind and communications and information. Plus, Mercury is literally stationing direct on this day, so Mercury is very amplified. The mind, the thoughts, a change of direction, a change of plans, or better understanding with direction and plans and processes that are taking place, things like that. But I still think it's better for people's feelings and how they're thinking. And then the moon is also trine Jupiter in that grand trine. So it's kind of there is support, there is things that are flowing and happening. But despite that, I feel like there would still be some pressure and heaviness at the same time. But things are still flowing and in alignment in good ways, generally, as the day is going on here. So if you have a personal planet at 20 degrees of Scorpio, then this Mercury stationing direct is highly significant for you personally. Plus, Mercury's been making a lot of aspects from Scorpio to Sagittarius in many different ways. But I think that the people most affected by this station would be people that have 20 to 21 degrees of Scorpio. And again, this is where Mercury is still deep in its retrograde shadow, but it's the final leg of this process that we've been in for a few weeks. Actually, over a month. So the moon is connecting in a good way to feeling nurtured, feeling abundant, home, family, people's need for safety and security and comfort. What I've been talking about with this Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter in Cancer, how Mars is ruled by Jupiter right now in Cancer. What I've been saying with this sense of people are driven by their need for safety and security and comfort. They may not have the safety, the security, and the comfort that they want, but that's a part of the process that's driving them to take action or what they're thinking about and how they're going to be moving past this to get what they need, even if they don't have it necessarily in this moment. So that's what, just to clarify what I meant about that. Okay, and then the moon is trine Venus. So this is actually feeling like it's a serious time, but, again, the moon is next to Saturn, but Venus is trine Saturn. So the moon trine Venus feels like people are feeling a little more content. little more satisfied. Again, it's another good connection to relationships and money things that are happening. But Venus is starting to build up to that exact opposition with Uranus. So it's kind of a turning point from this spot on Saturday, where money and relationships are going to get a little more dynamic, and some volatility is going to probably come in this weekend into next week. But in this moment, Saturday late morning, afternoon, depending on where you live, again, I think that there's a good connection here, that we can be somewhat satisfied and enjoying and indulging and feeling somewhat content, even though there's still some weight there. And then the moon is sextile Uranus, looking at the material life, money, resources, values, more comfortable with changes and things that are different and alternative in that moment on Saturday afternoon. And then the moon is conjunct Neptune, and things are super sensitive here on Saturday evening, Saturday night, before the moon changes signs. It will be a big mood change for sure on late Saturday. But in this moment, this is like highly sensitive. It's critical, a sense of ending. But moon Neptune is, drinking, it's alcohol, drugs, it's escapism, it's movies, it's film, photography, and, these things that are behind the scenes that are more like retreat, vacation vibes in that moment, but also highly emotionally sensitive and intuitive and psychic energy and imaginative and creative, and it's kind of all messy. It could literally be stormy or water events going on here, on Saturday night in some places. It's just not going to last, because that moon is going to change signs and ingress Aries on late Saturday. So late Saturday is a whole different flavor. And now the moon in Aries for the next 2.5 days is being ruled by Mars, which comes back to Sagittarius. And now there's a lot of fire going on, a lot of activity, a lot of passion. But usually the moon coming into Aries shows people want to be more independent, but people are probably a little more impulsive too. Things tend to speed up, and there are a lot more happening here. There's a lot more energy about the self, freedom and independence too, plus travel, plus adventure, because it comes back to Mars and Sag. But yet that Mars and Sag is still being ruled by Jupiter in the home, in the family, in the needs, in this inner life of safety and what people need and want. So that's just going to increase the impulsiveness to get what we want, what we need even more when the moon is in Aries. Plus the moon coming into the world point here puts world dynamics in the focus on Saturday night into Sunday and Monday. All right, so that's the mood change there. Moon in Aries now. And then Venus is making that exact opposition to Uranus on Saturday night too. So it's kind of a wild night on Saturday for people. People's preferences are beginning to change. There is going to be a big preference change generally, because Venus will leave Scorpio and leave its debilitation and enter Sagittarius. So things are beginning to change from Saturday night forward. But there also could be some surprises in relationship, potentially. Now, this is the culmination point of the Venus-Uranus conjunction. Now that Venus has come full around to the top. So it's like a flowering phase for Venus-Uranus energy. What people's preferences have been for something new, different, alternative, something exciting, money and resource dynamics and relationship dynamics in a new way that's been building up for a while, has now reached this peak and this culmination where we could be seeing the results of some sort of a money or relationship change from this point forward. But it also it's the beginning of this change too around the intimacy preferences, where Venus and Scorpio, it wants this deeper connection and this more vulnerable kind of all or nothing vibe that brings up a lot more of the jealousy and the unhealthy shadow within love and relationship stuff that people have to deal with. And now it's the beginning of generally Venus, relationships and love life and generally feminine energy, it's going to move into a place that wants more freedom, more independence, not wanting to go as deep and getting too smothered in power and control issues, especially as Venus comes into Sagittarius. But this is the beginning of that freedom component that starts to come in. So just know that relationships are going to kind of change flavors from this point in the world, and how that affects you will be different based on your chart, and what's going on in your own relationships. But just, I would expect for most people, just expect some sort of a new dynamic that starts to come in some of your important connections and financial stuff. And then the last aspect is the moon sextile Pluto. So now, again, there's another connection to the group, the friends, the community, social life, and more outward, more independent vibes. Again, a lot more about freedom and independence for people as we get to Saturday night and beyond. Okay, and then we get to Sunday on November 30th, and the moon is waxing through Aries, and we have a few aspects here. This is where Venus is reaching the last critical degree as well, from Saturday night into Sunday. A sense of an ending, a sense of urgency for something to change within a relationship. And it's tricky because Venus is trine Neptune, which is typically super romantic and sensitive and dreamy. But then that freedom component is also there and about to come in strong. So it's like one last connection to this deep, intimate fantasy kind of vibe that's in alignment for people. Venus and Neptune, one of the most romantic Venus connections there is. On Sunday early morning, before Venus changes signs. So most of Sunday, Saturday into Sunday, there's this extra dreamy, creative, romantic, or it could be romanticizing people, places, things that we desire. So, that's how I'm seeing it. Or wanting to escape or retreat from something is another interpretation we could say. But also, again, a sense of an ending and change that's about to happen or in a process of happening this weekend. And then the moon is trine the sun, so this is another good part of the lunar cycle where there's typically more cooperation, more things are flowing, less blocks, less restrictions and limitations. Generally speaking, because you might be under a Saturn transit that, you might personally have more of a challenge. But this is the background where two fire signs are in good alignment with each other. So the heart and the mind, well, more like the inner life and the focus is good alignment. Again, very active and busy, outward. I think that there's still a big overwhelming vibe of a lot of inward for people too, just because of the grand trine and all the water that's been in place for so long. We normally don't have this going on. And so I think it really does pull people inward more than normal, and more sensitive than normal. But in this part of the cycle, there's more passion, more fire, more instinct, generally more activity going on here in an outward way. And then Venus changes signs on Sunday afternoon. Yeah, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, depending on where you live. Now there's a change of preferences generally and desires and how people do love and relationship and how they value things, what they value, and money dynamics. So this is actually a positive for Venus because, again, Venus is leaving its debilitation. It doesn't have any special dignity in Sagittarius, but it's not debilitated anymore. And remember what I've said, when planets are coming out of Scorpio into Sagittarius, a lot of time it's this feeling of more optimistic, bigger energy, coming out of the deep end of life into a more positive kind of side of the zodiac, Sagittarius. We still have Mercury there, of course. We're still thinking very deeply. We're still researching and digging deep for truth and answers. And Sagittarius is all about the sign of truth, seeking truth, understanding, wisdom, and knowledge. And that's just increasing. Now that's where the pleasure is more and more now that Venus is there. So now this suggests that Sagittarius, people with a lot of Sagittarius energy, like their sun or their moon or their ascendant that have Sagittarius, now they're the attraction of the zodiac at this time of the year with Venus there. They get more beauty. They tend to get more love and attention when Venus moves over your personal planet in Sagittarius. But even there's a focus generally on Venus because Venus is approaching the sun. Of course, we can't see Venus up in the sky because it's under the rays of the sun. But there's going to be a process about that in the coming week and weeks here with this Venus. But it still shows that Sagittarius is most attractive for people. So this shows that, again, there has been a change in general relationship preferences to have more freedom now. Less of this, intensity in love and this all or nothing vibe and these undercurrents and all this deeper stuff that's been in play. Now Venus is in this more fiery, outward, adventurous sign. And again, Sagittarius is one of those signs that it is about the self. The fire signs are a lot about the self. So again, it puts more emphasis on the self and what we personally want, what we personally desire. And Venus here can show people are more attracted to traveling, foreign things, cultural things, education, learning new things. Venus in Sagittarius loves to learn, typically, normally. But again, all this Sagittarius in this particular phase has that connection to Jupiter in Cancer and your needs and your feelings and your home and safety, security, and comfort is really affecting people in this particular phase, what they need. Okay, so again, there's a big change in preferences, and Venus and Sag can also go big in love too. It's like it can, generally Sagittarius is a sign of indulgences. So now Venus is there, it likes to indulge even more, and it can go big in love. Like it can really expand quickly in feelings and desires and preferences in these new ways that are more exciting. But the problem with Sagittarius is it doesn't always last, But if you have fire and air signs, then now Venus is in better alignment with you. Thank God for me, because Mercury and Venus have not been aligned with my chart at all for weeks. And now Venus will start to build up into that. Okay, so yeah, that's the change. And then it's also going to kind of change money matter. So markets are going to be kind of setting into a new routine here after some volatility. But this is Sunday, so we'll see it the following day and the week ahead for December. I don't think it's bad, though. It doesn't look like it should be bad at the start. There's going to be some issues later on. For the new moon, when Venus also reaches the square with Saturn, that's going to affect the markets later on. But I think for right now, it's probably fine. Since Venus came into this better dynamic, the markets are probably reacting to things in a better way, I would imagine, even though we're still in this kind of down phase from the high. So it's also time to look at long-term stuff about value, investments, and money, thinking in the bigger picture, looking at the bigger picture in the future about money and investments, not just instant gratification. Okay, so that is, we have one more aspect, the moon in conjunct to the south node again. So again, having to make some sort of adjustment during the day on Sunday to work or service or health or other things that have been ongoing that we have to deal with as the moon reaches 14 degrees. Okay, and then we get to Monday on December 1st, and the moon is at the end of Aries. We have a mixed bag of aspects, a lot of challenging aspects. There is this one trine first thing in the morning on Monday from the moon to Mars. So now versus the square that we were dealing with the moon to Mars, now it's more flowing with the action, with how people feel. It's less tense, less aggressive. It's just more impulsive and active and adventurous. But the moon is also applying towards Chiron as it does once a month, and we have to deal with that. And there's also a lot of inconjunctions on Monday, which indicates some irritation will be on Monday and some adjustments to different dynamics that we have to deal with. So it's not as flowing. There's all these different vibes coming in different ways, including the moon in conjunct to Mercury, as Mercury is starting to build up momentum. From that stationary, it's kind of been stuck there at 20 degrees all week into next week. So how people feel versus the way they're thinking, adjusting between two different energies there on Monday. Not the best day for publishing and communicating and all the mercurial things. And then the moon is conjunct Chiron. So again, feeling some sensitivities, plus the moon squaring Jupiter. So it kind of reactivates that Jupiter-Chiron square that was in place for a while, that kind of has separated a little bit recently. So big feelings, big emotions, big circumstances that feel difficult. Could be some injuries, some accidents, some issues for some people on Monday, December 1st in the world. Comfort level, how we feel about certain beliefs and feelings about home and family stuff or the homeland. But things are just a little bit out of balance, it looks like, on Monday. Or just things are over the top. Like I said, big energy, big circumstances, big moods. People could overreact to certain things, or something could be literally happening that causes people to kind of go over the top with their feelings. But just be aware of that so that you don't get wrapped up in some big emotional dynamic on Monday in the morning or afternoon. If you're aware of it, you can tone it down and kind of avoid some of the drama of that, perhaps. But in other cases, it might be on a world level with earth events or other things that are just outside of our control, or for some people there. But then the moon will change signs. On Monday evening, Monday night, the moon will ingress Taurus now. For the next 2.5 days, the moon will be waxing through Taurus. Now the moon is being ruled by Venus, which is in Sagittarius, which comes back to Jupiter. Jupiter is pretty much the final dispositor of everything. Again, this base, this emotions and feelings and home and family stuff. And again, I say it over and over, but it's true. The need for safety, security, and comfort that has to be developed over this next year. Things have to change to expand our sense of safety, security, and comfort. And some people, again, might not be having that, but they have to take action to get that. And it has to be a long process. But anyway, the moon is still kind of now ruled by, again, indulgences and pleasures. The moon here is exalted, so it is a good moon position. But as I said last month, when the moon comes in, it has to square Pluto. And we usually see some sort of an event in the world. I can't say every single time, but the odds are higher. And we did last time. I forget exactly what it was, but there was definitely something that happened that's intense. Oh, I think it was, anyway, you can look back if you want, but moon square Pluto, again, there's a sense of intensity, transformation. It's powerful. It's outside of our control. There could be issues with friends and group and community stuff. There could be undercurrents, and then there could just be something that happens that is out of our control in the world that's powerful, intense, and kind of even destructive. That's actually the last aspect. The moon will also be in conjunct to Venus. So The moon, the feelings, the needs, the desires, they're kind of on two different pages. Moon in Taurus, it wants to keep, it shows that people want to be more stable, more secure, keeping things nice and pleasurable and comfortable for all involved. And yet we have to deal with the group, the friends, the community that's adding intensity in some way. So on Monday night, the vibes between the friends or something in your community might be off, and you might just be better off to avoid it if you can. Although Venus is building the sextile with Pluto, that'll be exact the following day on next Tuesday, December 2nd. But Venus is connecting to Pluto, the community, and being empowered and having an attraction and a desire, in a more different type of a way. But the moon is at odds with that first thing on Monday night. There's that square. All right, yeah, that's the last aspect, late on Monday night. Early morning hours for some people on Tuesday. So could be some sort of intensity happening for some people there. So that's probably one of the other more challenging days, it looks like. Could be Monday. But overall, I think Thursday, Friday, and Monday seem to have the most challenging aspects. And then I think Tuesday, Wednesday are flowing for the most part. There's a couple issues there. I think Saturday and Sunday, for the most part, are a lot more flowing and easier than Thursday, Friday, and Monday. But that's what I have for you folks, and I hope I hope you got something out of that. I hope it was helpful. And thanks for watching. And have a great holiday season if you're an American. Take good care.